What follows is a collage arranged from memories of children and friends and relations. It is intended to offer a portrait of a man whose life touched the lives of others in loving and in lasting ways. Dad had been places and done things that could fill volumes, but talking about his past was not in his nature. He simply used his past as a way to be a better person for those around him. He was one of 10 children, and fortunately for him, lived for many years with his childless aunt across town. This arrangement was just fine with Dad, his parents, and his aunt. But considering the cramped space and necessity to share back home with the 9 left behind siblings, there was considerable jealousy, and he kept the fact that he was privileged to be with his aunt somewhat quiet. He was generous to a fault, forgiving no matter the situation, soothing with a touch or a kind word, had a positive disposition that was contagious. He could be spontaneous. A niece recalls a spur-of-the-moment visit to his brother's house. He showed up in a jaunty Englishman's driving hat and gloves, driving a Porsche convertible that he had rented or perhaps borrowed or maybe stolen. No one really knew for sure. When his sister-in-law asked if he was having a midlife crisis, he replied, "Quite possibly." Right out of high school, Dad owned a beautiful Packard, and although it was worth more than they could possibly imagine, he allowed his 2 youngest brothers to learn how to drive with it. Brave as well as generous. He played saxophone in numerous big bands. In high school, college, and beyond, he rode the train to nearby towns to get to the gigs, and sometimes his younger brothers got to ride along. He didn't like waiting for anything. If the family went out to a nice restaurant and they were told that there would be a 5-minute wait, he would turn to us and say, "Well, where are we going now?" He was also famous for circling parking lots until a closer spot opened up. He had a deeply ingrained, old-fashioned sense of chivalry. He made it clear that the comfort of the fairer sex was to be considered at the expense of one's own at all times. He had an interesting habit of calling young females girls and older females gals. The line between the two shifted, of course, as he aged. Bill adopted his second wife's 2 children, and although they had some early contact with their biological father, he was always and will forever be their one true father. Working in insurance, he traveled extensively and would be out of town for days at a stretch. His youngest daughter, Heather, can recall special trips when he would allow her to accompany him. Jay enjoyed sleeping in his bed when he was away. In a way, it was an attempt to just stay connected to his dad. While most males in the family dealt with hair loss, Bill kept his full, thick, charming silver hair until the end, envied by brothers and nephews alike, and appreciated because of its hereditary nature by his son. He placed high value on music and on conversation. It was a blessing that he retained the ability to speak and listen to his favorite music well after his sight had considerably deteriorated. He loved a wide variety of music, big band and country, musicals and folk. Late in life, he became a man of his routines, as many do, but he always made room for unexpected visitors. His daughter-in-law, Lynette, shared that mornings with him nearly always began early, bright and early, with juice and grits and toast well done. Dad's love for trains, something he developed early in life, fostered by their heavy presence out west where he lived much of his adult life. He was glad to share that love of trains with his son Jay. That bond resulted in the construction of a massive model train set that overtook a third of the basement space in their Louisville home. He loved the weather, the terrain, and the rich history of the West, and enjoyed traveling, skiing, and hot air ballooning throughout New Mexico and the surrounding area. His oldest daughter, Chris, grew up there as an only child. Dad liked the spicy food, another homage to his time spent out west, particularly around Albuquerque. Although he didn't do lots of cooking when his kids were young, they remember that Sunday dinner was often his responsibility. What did he cook? Chili. All right. Try to introduce the kids to his love of spicy food. Dad enjoyed being in leadership roles, church, work, volunteerism, not for the power of it, but because of his ability to add value to a group or to a task. His daughter Heather often attributes his leadership skills to kindling her own and awakening her interest in becoming a leader over the course of her career. Although he could at times be ambivalent about his own spiritual beliefs, he was always curious and supportive about the choices others made. A favorite quote was from Voltaire: "I may not agree with anything you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Jay's best friend Lisa always referred to Dad as a leprechaun, owing to his small stature, his clever grin, his abundant, jolly personality, and his ability to hold you with a story if you were up for one. He was having children when many his age were becoming grandparents. He didn't become a grandfather himself until he was nearly 70. The first 4 grandkids were boys, and he was dearly hoping for a girl when his son Jay announced his wife's pregnancy. His initial response to finding out that it would be a boy was a vocal and clearly disappointed "Aw," until his wife poked him in the ribs and he changed it to an "Oh, okay, great." He later expressed a deeper and more honest gratitude when he realized that his last grandson would be the one to carry on the Dolan name. Those who came to know him later in life express the gratitude that they have had for knowing him. How he was someone that people wanted to be around. His friends appreciated that he kept up with what they were doing and always called them by some specific term of endearment, whether honey or sweetheart. He always mixed up Chris and Heather's names, even though they were the youngest and the oldest. He usually answered the phone by saying, "Hello, sweetheart," just to avoid confusion. Go ahead. That's the end of the collage. I'm sure I speak for many here in confessing that I wish I had known Bill better. We met shortly after he joined Heather and her family in St. Paul and started coming to the church. I felt an immediate connection. And from that moment, I also sensed his joyful, welcoming spirit. Heather's husband, Jason, told me that the first time they met, Bill accepted him as his own son. There was always room for one more at his table. He was the consummate gentleman. He was incapable of violating his sense of propriety, always deferring to the women in his life, holding doors open, pulling out chairs, stepping last out of the elevator. His manners were totally integrated into his character in a way that I fear is passing from the world. He was progressive in matters of religion and acceptance, while remaining old school in his appreciation of good manners. As a leader, Bill brought people together. Twice he was president of the Unitarian Church in Louisville, He generally worked to bring out the best in others, allowing ample opportunity for discussion and democratic decision-making. But when things got bogged down, as no doubt many of you know they inevitably do, he was not hesitant to do the right thing on his own. Once, when the church was all a dither about whether or not to buy an adjacent property that had become available, Bill went right out and bought it. The congregation soon realized he'd been right all along, and the building they built there has become key to the church's continuing success. No matter your perspective, no matter whether or not you believe in a life after death, I'm convinced that there is an immortality that we all can trust. Think about Bill's life. What values come through most clearly? A sense of unconditional acceptance, embracing and hospitable. The importance of good manners as a framework for true kindness, and a willingness to lead in ways that make a lasting difference in the lives of individuals and in the life of the community. These values, coupled with a fervent love of family, are what Bill Dolan held most dear. We honor him best when we take up the values he cared about most and cultivate them in our own lives. No cold stone monument alone will serve to honor this dear man. He lives on as his values live on. He blesses our lives as we care for and serve one another as he would surely have us do. May it be so, and amen. And now, in his honor, would you stand as you are willing and able and sing with us the closing hymn, You Are My Sunshine. We close with these words from the great Illinois poet Carl Sandburg. Gather the stars if you wish it so. Gather the songs and keep them. Gather the faces of women. Gather for keeping years and years. And then loosen your hands. Let go and say goodbye. Let the stars and songs go. Let the faces and years go. Loosen your hands and say goodbye. Please be seated.